Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucie, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you listen to this. And I want to welcome you to another episode of the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations podcast. Today, I'm going to be your host, and we will dive into a very difficult topic for some, and that is how to set boundaries around guilt tripping. One of the key benefits of this topic, and when we actually discover and learn how to set better boundaries and effective boundaries with people, even with ourselves, around guilt tripping, the outcome of that, it can be that your overall well-being can improve, and you might be more energized rather than drained from your relationships. And also you can do things for others because you genuinely want to do things for others, from kindness, from really being the person that you want to be, rather than from a sense of obligation and resentment. So let's dive into it. First, I'm going to share how to actually recognize guilt tripping, both in yourself and others. And why is that important, that self-awareness and being able to recognize that? Well, when we are aware, then that's when we have an opportunity to make a new choice that is not driven by our survival instincts, but is driven by the wisest part of our brain, and make a choice that aligns with our values, goals, and needs, and also leads to more happiness and inner peace as a result. So that starts with being able to recognize the signs of guilt tripping. In the next segment, we'll look also under the hood of the guilt tripping vehicle and look at why is it happening, really understand what's underneath it. And then I'll share with you some next steps, how to set the boundaries around the guilt tripping so that you can get different results, you can communicate differently. The first segment, what is guilt tripping? Well, it can be kind of obvious for a lot of us. It's instilling feelings of guilt. And what is guilt? Guilt says that what you did or what I did, basically behavior or actions, there's something wrong about them. I also want to make a distinction between shame, because often we confuse guilt and shame. Shame is actually when we are shaming ourselves or shaming somebody else, the way that they are being, the person is actually wrong rather than the behavior. So it's more personal. And sometimes guilt tripping can also turn into shame tripping. Now, guilt. When we think of a guilt, you may ask, is guilt a bad emotion? Well, I would say it depends. It depends. It can be how you use it and to what extent, right? So there is healthy versus unhealthy use of guilt. It's an emotion, and all the emotions are signals that are giving us signals that something is, if it's a negative emotion, it doesn't mean that the negative emotion is negative per se. It just gives us a signal. It's like an alert that something in our system or in our environment, something is off. And therefore, whenever we feel guilt, or we feel also the resentment, we feel the need to behave based out of obligation rather than because we want to, but because we have to or we are forced to, it's an invitation for us actually to pause and reflect. What is this guilt about? Before we just say all guilt is wrong. Actually, some guilt can be really healthy. So what is a healthy guilt? Healthy guilt kind of arises from actions that genuinely violate our moral or ethical standards. Guilt, when it's in the healthy range, can actually promote accountability, because we want to make sure that we don't hurt other people. Because if our value is kindness, we want to show up with others, be it in leadership or as a friend, as somebody that is kind to somebody else. And therefore, we don't want to break our word to them. We want to stay accountable so that we continue having that good relationship and showing up in a way that's aligned with how we want to show up. It also then guides our moral behavior. We don't want to hurt intentionally other people. Most of the people, they don't want to hurt anybody else, especially those people that they care about. And so guilt can motivate positive change when it's in the healthy range. Now, what is unhealthy guilt? Well, unhealthy guilt can be disproportionate to the situation, and it persists despite making amends or is induced by manipulative behaviors from others. Now, unhealthy guilt can lead to excessive self-blame. This can even contribute to issues such as anxiety, depression, and low esteem. It can be also used and manipulated by others. It can be exploited by them through guilt tripping and leading to emotion manipulation and unhealthy relationships. Now, back to how to recognize when somebody is trying to guilt trip us, or even when we are trying to guilt trip somebody else. Sometimes we are not even aware. And as I've mentioned before, the self-awareness is the first step to any change. So how to recognize guilt? I will share some examples here. So it could be number one category. It could be around expressions of sacrifice or kind of a symbol of victimhood and martyrhood. It could be sentences such as, after all I've done for you, you still cannot do this one thing for me. Or I've sacrificed so much, and this is how you repay me? Have you ever heard this from any of your parent figure? Or I guess I'll just do it myself since no one else cares. Or it could be another kind of a guilt-tripping statement. Well, it's fine, I'll manage. Yes, I'll be suffering a lot, but don't worry about me. You have other priorities. I'll just suffer through it. It's okay. Don't worry about me. Just go about your business. It could be also the tone of voice that comes together with the phrases. Now, another area that usually is when they are asking, they're not saying, I've sacrificed so much, but they're asking for your sacrifice and expressing hurt and disappointment. If you really cared about me, you would do this for me, even when it doesn't work and even it's painful for you. I've sacrificed so much, could be addition to that. Or a real friend would do this for me. It could be, I thought you were different. I am so disappointed in you. That also could be asking for your sacrifice and saying it could be a little bit shame tripping there as well, together with the guilt tripping. Implying neglect on or abandonment is another area where we can see guilt tripping. Let's say, for example, you never visit me anymore, and I guess you don't care about your family. Let's say we could hear that from some family members. I must not be important to you anymore because you behave this way. You never call me. This could be connected. So it's implying we are neglected or abandoned. And often it comes together with the words like always, you never, you must. And so there's exaggeration, and a lot of blaming. Now, what are so these are some of the phrases that whenever you hear yourself say it or you hear somebody else say those, pause is the first step. Now, there's also some signals from within when you are being guilt tripped. There's 3 signs that you can also look for. When you do something from being obligated or burdened. If you often feel sense of obligation or burden by somebody else's expectations, there might be some chances that you're being guilt tripped. When you also feel consistent self-blame and you frequently find yourself blaming yourself for somebody else's unhappiness or dissatisfaction. it could be also another sign that you experience emotional drain when interactions with the other person leave you feeling emotionally drained or anxious. These could be also signs and a signal for you to really pause and reflect on the relationship, on what's happening within you, and give yourself a moment of self-compassion, self-connection, and really pause and reflect on what's going on. I'll share a few next steps later. Why is this behavior happening? Why do people guilt trip other people? Well, one of the reasons it can stem from the desire of control. When guilt tripping is as means of control or influence other people's actions, it also happens when someone else is not considerate of your needs, but they just want you to be considerate of theirs. So it's kind of sign of an unbalanced relationship. In healthy adult relationships, there is mutual respect, there's mutual empathy, care, understanding, and compassion for each other, where both of the partners' needs or parties' needs, let's say if it's friendships or work colleagues, matter. In the unhealthy guilt tripping, there's one person's needs are always more important than the other person's needs. Now, it could be also another reason why unhealthy guilt tripping can happen, could stem out of insecurity, fear, or even past trauma. Let's say somebody who fears abandonment might use guilt to manipulate others into staying close or behaving a certain way. And so if you ever notice or caught yourself guilt tripping somebody else, again, pause and notice, has something really difficult happened in your past that from them you're really afraid of someone rejecting you or abandoning you? And you use guilt tripping as in an attempt to stay connected to somebody else and not lose them. And again, this is a space for compassion. This is not to judge or blame anyone. This is really to understand each other and understand why some people may have this behavior. It can actually be even the learned behavior. They can learn it from family members, from even cultural norms, or even previous relationships where these tactics were used. So some people just lack communication skills. They have no idea how to safely and assertively communicate their needs. And therefore they opt only for that's familiar to them, that maybe they've grew up in, communicating needs in a passive, aggressive, or manipulative behavior because they didn't grow up, let's say, in a safe environment where their needs were respected or even considered. And therefore, the only way for them to get attention and get their needs met, and therefore it's like a survival strategy, was to go into the extreme and use even guilt tripping tactics. So, some food for thought there, either about just pause and notice if you've ever done that in your life to somebody when you say, well, you're not really a good friend if you've done this, or you really don't care, or you really don't love me this because you've done this action. Or if you've heard it from somebody else, just notice and reflect. Can you think of a time in your life that you either done it to somebody else and notice what was the reason for me if I've done it? What was the trigger underneath that led to that behavior? And please make sure that you do that out of self-compassion rather than from blaming space. And sometimes it is difficult, and that's okay too. That's why we're learning. This is part of the process. Remember, everything is just a process. Even our growth is a process and always is a process. We are never done. At least I will be never done. This is continuous learning also for me. And if there is somebody in your environment that does a lot of guilt tripping, I invite you to also pause and share that empathy for them and notice how they are probably feeling. What's the need or value underneath that guilt tripping? What's a positive intention underneath the guilt tripping? And notice if you can find any there. Now, I'm not going to leave you here. If you need more time, pause the podcast. That's totally fine. And come back when you're ready. Now, in our next segment, I'm going to share a few steps, to be specific, 5 steps, what to do in those situations when somebody else is guilt tripping you. If you're guilt tripping somebody else, it could be also applied to you, but I'm going to be focused today on when somebody else is guilt tripping you, how to deal with that situation, and how to set and communicate the boundaries. Alrighty, are you ready? Let's get started. So step number 1, as I've mentioned it before, how self-awareness is important. Without self-awareness, there's no other steps possible that would actually lead to a new result. So what I mean by self-awareness, it's really being aware of what kind of person do I want to be. Let's say in the terms of friendship, what kind of friend I want to be. What kind of friends do I want to have? And for example, let's say your values, needs are mutual kindness in friendships, support, and mutual empathy for each other, and really wanting the best for each other. So if you like, even again, pause the audio and think about what do you need in your friendship? What kind of friend you want to be to others, and what kind of friends you really want to be your close friends. Now, once you're clear about that, step 2, recognize the guilt tripping when the guilt tripping actually is happening. And that could be that maybe the person is using the phrases similar to those that I mentioned above. Or you even get yourself, the phrases that if you truly love me, you would do this. It could be also based on your own feelings that comes together with the self-awareness. It's also self-awareness is a continuous process, right? So if you've noticed that you're feeling that sense of resentful, or that you have to take an action or support somebody else because of the obligation, but you really feel drained and resentful around that, that could be a signal that maybe you might be on the receiving end of guilt tripping. For example, you are canceling your lunch with a friend, with a dear friend of yours, over and over again, unfortunately, because you're just going through lots of changes in your work life, in your career. You have a new job, it's very demanding. Plus, you also have a spouse that's going through a difficult health challenge, plus the kids. So you really don't have that much for time for your friend, and your schedule is unpredictable because of all the other commitments that you have in your life. And so unfortunately, you canceled lunch with your dear friend for the 3rd time. And you were unable to call because you were in the environment where you had to be quiet. And so you just sent a text. And your friend was extremely upset. And that friend said, let's say you don't care about me anymore as a friend, and you never want to hang out anymore. And so notice there's the blame and overgeneralization. You never, that word never, want to hang out anymore. And you are not a good friend anymore. You must not care anymore. Okay, fine, I'll just be alone without any friends. And so that could be the guilt tripping, black and white thinking, because you canceled lunch. That means that you don't care about me anymore. Now, that could be also part of our cognitive bias, but about that also some other time. So if I summarize it so far, self-awareness, knowing what kind of friendships you want, what kind of friend you want to be. Let's say if we look at the area of friendship. The second step, notice whenever either you are guilt tripping somebody else or when somebody else is guilt tripping you. Step number 3, pause and get into a space where you can seek empathy, both and compassion for yourself as well as for the other person. Empathy and compassion for yourself. Empathy for yourself can look like, wow, ouch, that really feels bad. I want to be a kind friend, and my friend feels hurt, and I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to be a bad friend. So that could be really being aware and giving yourself the empathy and space to feel whatever you're feeling, and being aware of even the thoughts going in your head at that moment. The next step is pausing and checking in. What is my friend feeling? They seem to be really hurt as well. I did cancel the lunch 3 times this year already, and I get it that that just sucks. So also validating, being there both with yourself and the other rather than defending yourself, which would mean no compassion or empathy for the other. Let's say when somebody tells you you're not a good friend anymore, instead of validating and empathy for yourself and themselves, the way that doesn't work would be, well, you didn't pick up when I called you last time, so you're not a good friend to me either. And kind of guilt tripping them back. Even some conversations, unfortunately, can turn that way as well. When instead of us feeling closer as friends, we would continue to feel even further and further apart and resentful and upset, which doesn't feel good to anyone, at least based on my experience. Now, step number 4. So once you actually have that empathy and self-awareness, and for the other, empathy and also noticing how the other might feel, the next step is to really identify the boundary. So let's say in our case of friendship, I do want to be a good friend. I also have other priorities though in my life. It is my family, my health, and me as a professional. In order for me to be balanced and healthy person, I also need to prioritize other areas in my life, not just the friendship. And so, what is the boundary? What is something that I can do that is not gonna drain me and is not gonna hurt me, but it's something that I can do to also, because friendship is also an important area of my life. So, where is my boundary? In our example, it could be okay, I cannot meet that often anymore as we met when we were in college because my life circumstances completely changed. But I can do a lunch or a call, let's say. The worst, if I cannot do even lunch, at least let's have a call. Or it could be even just Zoom conversation, a video call once a quarter. Now, so that would be identifying a clear boundary. What is the last step? Well, communicating. Step number 5 is actually to communicate the boundaries to somebody else. For example, in the case of a friend saying, you're not a good friend anymore because you keep canceling the lunch, you never make time for me. It could be validating, I'm so sorry, it sucks. I completely understand how you must be upset. And I understand your perspective that it looks like that I am actually not a good friend anymore. Please know I still value and appreciate you as a friend. And it sucks. Right now, my life circumstances, my family, I've told you before, my partner is sick, and this new job is really crazy. I am exhausted. And so please know that I didn't do it to hurt you, or I didn't cancel because I don't care. I canceled because honestly, I was outside of my bandwidth. I just really need to prioritize these areas. I was really thinking about this, and I think I can meet you, but not as often as in the past. I believe I can, but I really want to keep our friendship. Would that be okay? Let's have a lunch, or if I cannot do lunch because I cannot commit right now to having a lunch till the job situation is gonna stabilize. Let's have a lunch at least once a quarter. And how about we pick a time right now for, I can make the lunch 2 weeks from now. I'm gonna put that in my calendar. And let's say I would also love to plan a plan B with you in case something happens that my partner needs me to drive them into a hospital or something at that moment because things are unpredictable. Let's agree on a plan B. If that time, for whatever reason, doesn't work, let's find a plan B. I really want to keep that friendship with you. What would work for you? And have a conversation from there. Now, if that seems super crazy or weird to you, it's okay. Next week, I am being the guilt tripping friend, unfortunately, to Chris, where we will have role play episode. And Chris will role play for all of us how to deal with me, his guilt tripping friend. Having these difficult conversations may be tricky, but this is a practice in our personal growth. And with the word practice, we may suck at it at the beginning. It may feel unnatural at the beginning, and that's okay. That's part of the progress. Just like when we learn, let's say, salsa, when we never danced anything, that we might be weird, right? We may step on other people's toes, or we can even trip, and it will feel unnatural to start with. But even just setting boundaries, if you're somebody who is uncomfortable setting boundaries of having these conversations, it will get better with the more practice you get. And the more we are aware and self-aware of our values and needs, how we are feeling, the better we can communicate what we need and where our boundary with others is. And the better and more fulfilling can be our relationships as a result, as well as our health can improve. Because we have people that in our circle, once we communicate those boundaries, those people that actually respect and honor us and the boundaries, and we honor and respect theirs, those people in our inner circle will be those that are really kind and respectful to us. And we recharge each other and support each other in our personal growth. I would love to see and hear how this was for you. Anything that was missing, anything that you don't agree with, any questions or suggestions, please let us know. If you found this valuable and helpful, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast so that you can listen next week to a roleplay episode, as I've mentioned, where I'm guilt tripping my dear friend Chris into spending more time with me, his old friend. Now, notice when you listen to it next week how he responded, and take a moment to pause and reflect on the situation in your life where you were either guilt tripping unknowingly someone or someone was guilt tripping you, and see what you can take from this and the next episode to have more kindness, closeness, mutual compassion, and deeper connection in your professional and personal relationships. So, thank you for listening to this solo episode of our podcast, and I wish you lots of success, happiness, inner peace, and well-being. And please know your feedback is really important to us. And if you need further help in making difficult conversations easier, reach out to Chris or myself. We'll be happy to help.